Okay, so back to translating and reflecting graphs. We're just going to do a little bit more with them. So here, what's going to happen again, that number out in front of A, basically, or the number in front of the sine, cosine, tangent, that's going to tell you your amplitude. B is going to help you with your period. So the period of this guy, since a number in front of x is 1, we're just going to stay at 2 pi. I'm going to zoom in here a little bit. So 1, 2, 3, 4. If you haven't picked up, the reason why it's 4 is because there's 4 turns to get around the unit circle. So if you're on that unit circle, it's 1 turn, 2 turns, 3 turns, 4 turns. So to get full circle, I'm at 2 pi. To get halfway across would be pi. To get fourth of the way across would be pi over 2, and then 3 pi over 2. Okay, amplitude of change would just make it but 2 and negative 2. You're basically taking the unit circle values and multiplying the x's, because of cosine, by a positive 2. So positive 2, so we'll start off at 2 for cosine, times 2, back to 0 at pi over 2, times 2 will get you a negative 2 at pi. Okay, times 2 will get you back to 0, and then to a full period, we're going to go back to 360 or 2 pi to get 2 again. So that's what it looks for the cosine of x being multiplied by 2. What we're going to start doing is translating and moving them up or down. Don't worry, we're never going to move them left or right, so that k is going to be your vertical shift. What we're also going to have is your reflection. So now if a is negative, it might flip it upside down. This midline, right now it's always been the x-axis. This midline would be, I'll go back up to this one, would be this line right here. And that's kind of the distance or the line that we would measure the amplitude. We can move the midline along with the rest of the graph, because if we shift it up plus k, not only will we be moving all the points of the trig graph, but we'll also move the midline too. So here we go. In terms of translations, we got the amplitude of 4. There's a 1, so your period is going to be 2 pi. So this plus 5 is going to tell me that I'm going to move my graph up 5. Okay, amplitude of the absolute value of that negative number, 1/2. The negative is going to be part of my translation, so that means it's going to be reflected, in this case the x-axis, which will actually change because we're going to move it down 9. Now this 2 is going to make that 2 pi over 2, so now our period is only going to be pi. Okay, so there we go, parent function. I kind of graph these all at once just because we've been practicing, and then I worry about that second. Okay, so I'll start off, I'll go with 4, negative 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. My period's going to be 2 pi, so pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. Okay, so here's what cosine would look like right away. Maybe I can change colors here right now. So let's go with 0 or 1, which is 4 because they multiply by 4. Okay, again, those are taking the x values in the unit circle and just multiplying them all by 4. Now what this up 1 means is that I'll take this graph and I'll move this up to 5. This is going to shift up to 1. This number is going to shift to negative 3. That's going to go up to 1. That's going to go up to 5. And there in purple here is my cosine that was multiplied by 4 and added 1. Now that midline, this x-axis was the midline, it's going to get shifted up to 1. And all that's going to help me is this distance here should still be 4. This distance here should also be 4, because that's my amplitude. Yeah? Ooh, let's try that again. That's got quite a bit going on. This time here, I'm going to take it and I'm going to multiply everything by negative 2. So I'm going to actually get that unit circle And notice how I don't even write the dots on the X and Y axis. It's only really the numbers that I'm worried about. And I'm going to multiply all of those by a -2. So that would be -2, 0, +2, 0. Okay, period. 2 pi over 1/2. My period is going to be 4 pi. Where'd the 1/2 come from? It's that number in front of there. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4 pi. Half of that is 2 pi. Half of that is pi. The middle of that would be 6 pi divided by 2. So 3 pi. Now my amplitude, I'm going to go up to 1, 2, -1, -2. And I'm going to work my way around that circle. So start off at -2 now instead of +2. Going back up to 0. And then to +2. Okay, back to 0. And then -2. So that is my amplitude and actually a reflection and the period. Now what this -1 is going to tell me is I'm going to have to drop each of those values down a block. So this would go down to -3. Okay, here is going to go down to -1. This is going to drop down to 1. This is going to drop down to -1, -3. And if you notice, I'm not very good at drawing to scale real well, but you get the idea that here is the final product of changing the amplitude to 2, the period to 4 pi, flipping it over, reflecting it, and then moving it down 1. So I know that's a lot to take in, but hopefully that will be a good start. We can practice these a lot with some whiteboards and things like that.